Okay, right. It's 2 minutes past two. I think we'll get going. And I want to thank you all for joining the webinar today, where we will be discussing getting started with digital learning. A little bit of housekeeping. The lines are muted, but there will be a Q&A at the end, and you can enter questions in the chat box throughout. The call is being recorded, and a replay link will be available to all registrants. Now, please may I introduce you to our two speakers. We've got David Perring, who's the Director of Research at Fosway Group, which is Europe's #1 HR industry analyst. Now, David has been involved in education and talent development for over 30 years. Today, he provides expert advice and thought leadership to organizations looking to transform their people functions. We're also joined by Edan Sol, who's the L&D manager at Playtech, market leaders in the gambling and financial trading industries. Edan branded his Litmos LMS to create the Playtech Academy for training employees and customers across their many different global businesses. But to start with, I'm going to hand over now to David to tell us all about getting started with digital learning.
Thanks so much, Paul, and thank you everybody for joining this afternoon. As usual, we have a shed load of content to try and work our way through. So what I'm going to do is just give you a little sense. So this is what we had in the outline for our agenda. Want to talk a little bit about how to build a simple digital learning strategy that works, give you a sense about building a business case, the importance of understanding your business drivers, where to invest, explore a little bit about the buying journey if you haven't gone through that before, and explore the options and some lessons learned. And in some ways, we're very lucky because I've got some research and loads of experience, but we've also got Eden here to provide us with the practical view of what it takes to be successful with digital learning in the real world. So we were going to do a quick survey test sort of conversation for you first, and what I was hoping is we'd be able to do a little bit of a chat, but what we can maybe ask you to do is think about this question: is how much has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted your L&D team? And what we want you to do is just maybe in the chat area to get you focused is to type in, were you completely impacted? Was it a significant change in what you do and how you do it? Did you only have to make some personal changes or not at all? And while we're waiting for you to type that in, we get a sense just by this sheer cascade of responses that you give us where you're at. Eden, just from your experience and your experience with digital learning, how much did the pandemic affect your L&D team?
Well, it's a very good question. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, perfectly.
Perfect. It's so first, hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar, and I want to address your question, David, because actually, when I come to think about it, the COVID crisis did not really affect our business at all because we were in partnership with Litmos, and most of our operations are online to begin with. So when all hell broke loose, basically, we found ourselves in the midst of the storm that was sweeping through the whole globe. But we were very resilient because everything that we've done so far was done online, so it didn't catch us off guard. The main thing that I think employees across the business kept repeating through this crisis is how disconnect they feel from the business and from everybody else, which is a very social element, which has nothing to do with learning per se. But even to address that sort of issues that was going around, we created a campaign that was very much tailored to the days of COVID. But again, because we had the online infrastructure intact and in place before the whole thing happened, for us it was very, very easy to convert everything that we had, the very little that we had in the face-to-face realm, into online.
If that answers your question. Spot on. I mean, that's a really interesting answer. And looking at the responses that people have typed very creatively into the questions area, because like the chat area is a little bit constrained. Most of the responses have said we've almost completely had to change what we do as an L&D team, or significantly. And that reflects very much probably the feedback we've had when we did a survey probably about last month around where people saw the challenges for learning technology. So let me try and get rid of that thing and then try and navigate on. Here we go. So, and I think there is this sense, and I sort of picked out this this graphic or this cartoon from the internet, really, and it was just sort of reflective of something I saw on LinkedIn, which was who did the digital transformation of your company? Was it your CEO, the CTO, or was it COVID-19? And I think everybody's experienced this sense of suddenly virtual working, having members of their team furloughed. And what we saw from our research that we asked, we had about 130 people come back to us, was that everybody had been impacted in some way, but almost 2/3 have had to make significant changes in how and what they do with learning. And I think to some extent, Eden, it's probably a testament to the forward thinkingness of both you and your organization, that you were more prepared because you'd made a little bit of a switch, or maybe a significant switch, to digital learning already. What the people told us in our survey was that their investment, or the amount of spend that they were making, had almost gone into reverse around traditional approaches, and there had been a massive swing to digital learning. What we asked people was, is your spend on these areas increasing or decreasing as a result of the pandemic? And we gave them 3 choices. One was increase, one was no change, and the other was decrease. And what you're seeing in the colors here is the amount of people who are saying decrease minus the increase. And you do get this sense of investing in content, investing in platforms, investing in services, thinking a little bit more about data analytics. But the real story isn't about maybe just responding to the changes that COVID brought through virtual working, but just the level of maturity and how the maturity with digital learning impacted people's ability to cope. And again, in the survey that we did, and this was only about 4 weeks old now, 59% thought their digital or adoption of digital learning was immature. So that you can get a sense of those who thought it was mature. So that was, see, 41% of my maths is serving me right, correct me if I'm wrong, just in terms of who thought they had a mature approach. Now, that has some impact on their ability to cope. And what we saw was those who were mature in digital learning found it twice as easy to cope than those who thought they were immature. And I think it's really interesting, that sort of sense of being the digital functionality within learning enabling you to cope with the virtualization. And I suppose it's, and Eden, from your point of view, were there particular things that you saw being more successful for you as people transitioned, or even maybe even help people cope with their sense of isolation?
Yes, definitely. Because this whole thing was really a surprise. Nobody planned this, and nobody saw that coming. A lot of the things that we had to do during the last 3 months was more responsive to the situation rather than being proactive and thinking, okay, how can we deal with this? So to address for example, the mental issues that we've seen across the business of people feeling isolated at home, we created a campaign called Stronger Together, that all of it took part online. And that is, people can opt into sessions starting from welfare and health and fitness and even coaching to a certain extent. And then people suddenly felt, especially during the first month, because now we see a decline in participation, which means people are already got used to the new normal. But in the very beginning, we saw a lot of people, massive amount of people. We're talking about more than 3,000 people opting to all sorts of sessions. And then we realized, okay, something really extraordinary happens here, because if on an average month, we used to have a participation of between 50 to 100 employees per event, suddenly we saw this massive spike from these numbers to 4 digits participants. And it goes, okay, obviously we haven't done anything new. We've been doing this for many months now, so obviously people need more attention. So yes, definitely, absolutely, the fact that we had the online infrastructure, and we could have, basically what we did, we harnessed that ability to, but for a different purpose, because usually it's more about, for us, it's more to do with knowledge, with product knowledge and company processes. But now we discovered a new facet for the online, and that is taking care of your fellow coworkers.
Okay. Yeah. And did you see a change in how the sort of tools that you use? Was it about more virtual, sort of same time scenarios, or was it about providing self-paced material? How did that change?
That is a very good question, but
Yeah.
I think it's actually a blended approach to have
Yep.
both.
Yep.
We started with self kind of videos that you can watch, for example, how to work from home, how to take care of your environment, how to have a suitable working station, for example. And all these kind of materials were done
Yep.
in an e-learning format where you can watch this video whenever you want.
Yep.
But then we understood that this actually contributes to the isolation.
Yes.
And if we're telling employees, go ahead and do your online training, whatever you want, we're missing a very important element, and that is the togetherness. And that is exactly what people are craving for in this time. So what we've done, we took a couple of steps back and said, okay, we're not going to lay heavily on the e-learning tutorials, and instead we're going to create a very dynamic online schedule that people can opt in and out from and decide whether they want to show up or not. And that gave them another option to see other employees such as themselves sitting together in the same thing, and they go, okay, we're not alone in this. So if I'm showing up for a mental health session, I'm not alone. I have people to support me. Other people are feeling the same way. So that there's a massive kind of feeling of partnership in the situation. And that's where Academy, my team, and what we do, this is exactly how we fit in, because we had the technological element in place. We have the knowledge, so we basically drove the whole company forward in terms of that.
But it's interesting,
I
isn't
hope
it?
I answer your question.
Spot
I have
on.
the tendency of talk about everything.
No, it's really fascinating, and I think it's really interesting, sort of the ability of being almost being a sort of, I suppose, a bold explorer of digital learning early on enables you to be much more responsive to the changes that are around you. One thing I'm curious about is, do you think already you've learned lessons from what you've seen in terms of people's adoption, this sort of sudden burst of energy around digital learning within your organization, that sort of pull of demand? Do you think that's going to change some of the approach that you've picked up over the last few years in what you've done historically? Is it changing how you're approaching the use of, say, more collaboration, for example?
I think to some degree it depends, because I will split this answer into two elements. The first element, which I'm sure that a lot of people on this call is struggling with, is how do I convince the business that e-learning or training remotely is something that we need to invest in, because LMS is quite an investment, especially in companies that they don't have it right now. So then they go, the COVID crisis gave these companies and gave people in our business the ability to thrive and say, wait a minute, we need e-learning. You see what's going on in the world, and the face-to-face days will not be back anytime soon. So the first thing that I think COVID really kind of helped all of us on the call is to make our case back to the business and say, okay, we need to have LMS in place. Now, when you have LMS in place, what are the lessons drawn from the last couple of months when you already have an established online presence? What else can you learn from that? I think the thing that I learned the most from it is first that live sessions or online sessions are the future. I've been professing this for the last 2 years everywhere I went, and I said to people, face-to-face is basically a dead horse. No, we don't need to invest in that. So it reaffirmed what I've been saying all along, and also it gave me a better understanding of how much people need the online, not the online tutorials, that is the training on demand that you consume, how much they need the togetherness of coming in and to give them a collection of training so they can do this and they can do that and they can learn by themselves, but they can also meet with other people. Definitely, absolutely, very, very much.
And it's interesting because it sounds like from the things that you've done and your experience, actually you're probably in the top % of people who get value from their platforms. And what's interesting for us, again, we did some research at the start of the year around asking the question, do you think your learning platforms fit for the modern workforce? And we've done this for a couple of years now. And typically you see 50%, and this year it was 65% saying, no, our learning platforms aren't fit for the modern workforce. Maybe the user experience isn't great. They feel a bit clunky. they're not offering the functionality that we need. And it sounds like what you've got is a much richer balance. So do you have any sort of thoughts about, so if you're in this yes camp of maybe 30% of people who think it is fit for the modern workforce, what do you think it is in there? What sort of functionality or what sort of features do you think would bring the people who are in the red into the green, if that makes sense?
Oh, such a good question. The first thing that comes to my mind when you asked it, actually, it has several layers, but let's start with the most obvious one, and that is the user experience. If the we live in a very different world that we lived in 20 years ago, and nothing to do with COVID. But if you look at the training business in whole, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we used to have very long classrooms, a very specific methodology of conveying messages and making people learn something. In this world today, people want to consume knowledge very quickly. They don't want to sit in a classroom and consume knowledge. They just want to be able to take it whenever they want from online platforms. A lot of young people obviously joined the workforce in the last decade, and that's changed things and shifted things. Obviously, the Instagram generation that is used to watching a story of 2 seconds does not want to watch a tutorial for 20 minutes. So user experience and user compatibility, that would be the first thing that comes to my head, because you need to know your audience and you need to know who are you serving, in this system. And then when you make a good selection, that's the first thing. And then the second thing that I would add to that, for me, which is a move from the no to yes, is about the engagement. And engagement is far more than just saying, oh, this person is engaged with an LMS. It's about what kind of, again, back to my first point, what kind of experience are you going to give to the learner, but from an engaging point of view? That can be, for example, the Netflix experience. Tailor courses to the user, to the learner. I want to know what I want to know, not what you think that I should know. Gamification is a massive important part of this as well. People like rewards and people like to be rewarded for something that they've done. So if I can give them points or badges or even physical prizes to sort of like accompany their learning process, I would do that as well. So I'm very happy to say that in my world, in our little Playtech world, our learning platform, I can definitely say, is very much fit for the modern workforce, but the one that actually works in Playtech. Because I guess if you go to a different company, the concept of modern workforce might be translated differently.
I think that's a great answer, and I think it really hits home the importance of understanding your user, connecting with them, understanding what excites them, understanding their context. So I that's a spot on. And again, for people just generally, if you've got some questions that you want to ask us as we go through, please throw them at us as we go too. But what we're going to talk a little bit now about is just the sense of how do you build a simple learning strategy that works? What sort of is fit for the modern workforce? And Idan's given us a little bit of a sense, and I think what I wanted to do is just sort of give you a little bit of a view from what we've seen consistently across lots of organizations, is that sense of connecting with why. And Idan, I think you said some really interesting things about processes, knowledge, and the skills of your organization at Playtech. And I think it's just really interesting how that sort of comes together, because when we think about how you sort of think about your strategy, the thing to focus on is really what's the value or what's the scale of your business, sort of your value add. And we tend to think about this as almost on that sort of left-hand side as having 3 layers. One is operational efficiency and process optimization. So how can you make sure the training gets to the right people faster with much more fluidity, like Idan was talking about? Then that sense of how you drive maybe a bigger scale of value through performance and productivity, so enhancing the day-to-day performance of your people. And there's some ideas on the right-hand side of the sorts of things that you might be supporting at that level. And this final layer of being a strategic game changer. So what is happening in your organization around new markets, new products, new ways of working that you need to be aligned to, that help you drive the priorities and change within your organization. I think that's one of the key important things. So when people go to the digital learning market space to buy something, I think it's really important to know why, what you're trying to impact. The other thing is connecting with what and who. And again, we tend to think about this in sort of almost three buckets. This sense of, are you driving operational performance? Are you really focusing on strategic talent development? Or are you trying to develop just a personal learning culture? Just to give you a sense of what some of these mean, operational performance is really about what people need to know, be able to do, how they behave, and how you support them in delivering their results now, maybe out to 3 months. Whereas strategic talent development is probably that 3-6 month sort of future development of people, the future talent growth, which enable you to be an organization tomorrow that's fit for tomorrow, so that can survive new markets, new challenges, new technologies. So one's about almost today's performance and that impact now. Future success is being able to sort of make a little bit of a second guess around what skills, what competencies, what organization, what culture, where do I need to be my people to be engaged, how do I project and propel their career forward. And I think it's interesting to get a sense of, in your own agenda, what are you trying to focus on? And quite often what we see is, depending on where you sit in the organization, people who are more business aligned focus probably 90% on the operational performance and sacrifice a little bit of the talent development of the future performance in 3 years time, maybe, or a year's time. Whereas people who sit in group functions sometimes become disconnected from the operational performance because they haven't got their hands dirty enough. And I think it's an interesting sort of conundrum to work out what ball you're sitting in. On the personal learning culture, this is just something that if you get people into a habit of learning and how you support that, that's something that maybe feeds the other two bubbles. Eden, is this something that you recognize? You think this is, does it make sense to you about how you balance your focus around learning?
Absolutely. I mean, when you put this on a canvas like this and you present it, obviously it makes sense. But to me, it's more like, through a hands-on work. This is exactly the way that you laid out the three different verticals. This is exactly how we refer to it as well. So we have the impact now, and that is a very important the best example I can give is what we've done with COVID, for example. And that is the Stronger Together campaign, where we said we have to do this now. This is an operational performance and make sure that everything will go down the pipeline. But yes, definitely, we're thinking about future success, and that is when we want people to learn more about what they need to do. That brings to the surface one of the most important features in digital learning, and that is competencies, and make sure that people learn what they need to know based on their skill level, based on what expected them to learn. The third one, the personal learning culture, where this is a vision, right? We want everybody to go and learn more and know more, but this is way above the expectancy. But I can tell you this from our experience in Playtech is that we see an increase of people that take our skill zone courses. Skill zone are courses that we import from other providers that has nothing to do per se with our products or what we do, but it's more into expanding your horizons about other things. And we see a massive surge in these courses that people take, which means that 3 years after the implementation of an LMS across the business, we're doing something right. People are actually interested in the content that we're selling, on top of what you mentioned before, which is the impact now, the stuff that you must do, versus the things that you volunteer to learn, which is, I think, one of the most important KPIs, because the higher you go in the scale that you presented, if we go into the personal learning culture, if I have, let's say, 20% of employees that learn on their own without me encouraging them to do so, it immediately implies that the first two layers are very much successful. And that makes me really happy.
And I think it's really interesting how you sort of try and blend these together, because I think quite often people think, well, personal learning is not business driving, so therefore it's something that we shouldn't invest more in. But I think what you have to think about is when you get a habit of learning, what actually you're doing is creating a learning organization. People become enthusiastic. I've seen loads of really interesting things from the guys at Novartis, and they're talking about curiosity as being a bedrock to the future success of their organization overall. Obviously, it matters a lot to them, but you can see that being something that drives a lot more adaptability in individuals, a lot more openness, and a lot more innovation. And it's really interesting sort of how that impacts organizations overall.
Absolutely. And I also want to add to what you said, David. It's one thing to force people or employees to
Yes.
do trainings because you said so.
Yeah.
And you tell them if you don't do that, then your job might be at risk or you're going to get penalties or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing when everyone is doing the compulsory trainings, but on top of that, they seek more. And that's how you really create a learning culture. And I think probably the last one that you said that people usually are very remiss of
Yeah.
and say, oh, this is not a money maker, so I don't want to put
Yeah.
a lot of effort into it. That's actually the one that is the gem that is hidden from
Exactly.
everyone.
Exactly. And I think it's really interesting, the things that people learn a little bit out of their usual sphere they bring back to work. Maybe it's something that they've been learning Taekwondo and they've become a black belt and now they're leading other people in their dojo around what they do. Those are transferable skills that they will bring back to your organization, both in terms of their peace of mind and their sense of authority, and that how that infects other people in your organization. I think you have to think much more broadly about this. So I suppose we've got trying to reconnect with what I said before. So we've got this sense of, if you're going to develop a really strong digital learning strategy, think about the why. So how you're going to drive value. That really opens up your business case. Think about your audience and the context and what you're trying to drive, and try and think about these sort of three bubbles. The other thing is just think more broadly about how people learn. And
David, can I just jump in?
Yeah, sure.
There's a few questions popped up.
Yeah, sure.
I wonder if you might, so Edan, first of all, thank you for your input so far. It's been fascinating.
Amazing.
David, there was a question, what is the unfair advantage at level 4, please?
Okay.
But past that, you want to jump back to it, or you want me to tackle it head on?
Yeah, sure. Let me quickly go back. Oops, I pressed the wrong button. Let me flick back quickly. So when we talk about sort of having an unfair advantage, this is very specific to your organization. Things when you think about the context of your organization and your marketplace that might drive something that nobody else in your industry is doing. And sometimes that might be things about adding, maybe it may be things to do with automation, for example. So there could be some things about innovation in your business, not just in L&D, which is about machine learning. It may be about robotics. It might be about digital transformation. But how do you change the way that people think or interact in their processes that enables you to drive maybe a higher level of performance than they would normally get? So there may be things like performance support or performance optimization. And what I mean by that is the system can recognize the sorts of package that you're speaking to somebody about in terms of an inbound call, and it prompts you to say, these are some good upsell opportunities that you may not have recognized yourself, which you should be talking to this customer about, because if you keep them on the phone for another 30 seconds and mention these things, you're likely to get maybe a 50% higher chance of upsell if you mention these phrases. So there's things that the intelligence in the machine can maybe augment the performance of the individual to help them make better decisions or create better challenges for customers. It may be about actually being much more dynamic as an organization and promoting a lot more peer-to-peer action-based learning, so that the things that we're learning really work as the environment changes around us. We're feeding back to others faster. It may be that you think about putting in things like personal career development bots that challenge people to set higher goals, because you want people to stretch themselves to maybe have a higher level of ambition about what they do for your organization. These are just a few examples of almost trying to create this sort of sense of how could you innovate your culture, your organization, how people perform in your organization, which give you an advantage which is beyond what would be fair if you compared yourself to other players in the market space. So that's the way I tend to think about it, right? And hopefully that sort of makes sense.
That's good. Let me just throw another few things in. We've had some interesting points made in the questions box, so please keep them coming. One person mentioned that their learner engagement increased from 53% of staff actively engaged online to 75%, which is very significant, isn't it?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. We did some, again, part of the research, we saw about an 82% increase in demand from stakeholders around digital learning and a 74% increase in demand for digital learning from end users when we did our 130 survey from last month too. So there seems to have been a groundswell, like Eden was talking about, not at the scale of Edan's going from hundreds to thousands, which is a remarkable story, right?
I think one of the challenges has definitely been, though, that obviously the pandemic has accelerated the transformation to digital, but
Yeah,
obviously some L&D staff have really suffered because they've been furloughed or
yeah,
maybe taken down to one person, and with just
yeah,
one person to run the whole
yeah.
online platform for a company, that can be really, really challenging for
There
people.
is a challenge, and I think that's one of the things, right, around understanding your value add. Because if you are just a cost center, and I've been through organizations twice that have been both through the dot-com boom and then the crash in 2008, the first thing the CFO does is look at the bottom line and say, we need to remove cost. And as that starts to filter through your organization, there are really strong challenges around, we need to do more with less, or sometimes we stop doing things because we can't afford to have those people around. If you are only an L&D cost center, you will get cut. If you are a value add, if you're a business enabler in the way that Eden is, and the great things he talked about, sort of driving product knowledge, driving sales and things like that, that is a value add to the organization. And it's really difficult to cut things that will generate value, generate money for you. And this is what this, I suppose, this level for anything 3, 4, and 5, really, or 2, 3, 4, and 5, you could probably find a business case that enables you to release funds. And if the money is not going to come from your CFO, you do need to go to your customer services director, you need to go to your sales director, you need to go to your operations director to say, how do you need to improve performance? The investment does come.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's about training customers and about reducing support calls and generating new revenues.
Yeah, exactly. Or exploding sales, right? And if that's because people need to know more about a new product line, or you're innovating your product lines, then there are things that you can tie yourself to.
Someone mentioned, Edan mentioned a little bit about blended learning, and it's not just about online taking courses, because one person pointed out that they do online trainer-led sessions for their customers, and it gives them a discussion element and a personality. So it's online, but it's a real person at the end of it.
Yeah, and I think that sort of segues us quite nicely into this sense of, so the third pillar almost of your digital learning strategy has to be about what you think learning is, or what sort of experiences you're trying to create. And in the past, I think, again, going back to what Eden was saying, sort of like 20 years ago, it was just about formal delivery, and that is the bread and butter of many learning departments. But how you also support, again, like Eden was saying, around this more collaborative conversation, how you support learning in the workplace, which involves maybe teams and managers, is probably one of the important things that you have to think about if you're going to embrace the right combination of technologies and think about how you're driving value at scale, which is what the pressure for most organizations is going to be over the, I suppose, the next year at least, in a way. And I think this sort of sense of this, of being both about delivering formal learning at scale, but also how you support maybe more workplace reflections, both providing performance support, performance management, having mentoring, coaching.
That's there's a good one here
in this virtual world.
To support that, there's a good one here where this person put in a lot more online training for customers to get them to move to work from home. The support team was overwhelmed. So by training the customers better, it saved them from going underwater with webinars and online academy content.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, I'm saying some great observations here, but sorry, David, I'll let you carry on, please.
No, it's all right. But I think this almost becomes the third pillar, and I think it was a great segue, because this sense of how do you expect people to learn, and how you're going to harness all of the resources that enable people to learn is probably a really important step when you reflect about your digital learning strategy. As I said, you see lots of people focus on the formal delivery, and that's a great thing to scale up. It enables you to sort of overcome the challenges of distances and time and numbers of people. One person can train thousands in one go potentially, but also to think about how you create more collaboration, how you create that connection, now communities to surface their own knowledge and share that. Also how you support people in their own team, in the workplace, through feedback, through coaching, through mentoring, is really important too, and how you sort of support people through the entire cycle, right? Of knowing what they need to learn, as Eden said, around competencies or skills, then what their plan is to resolve that, and how they then move from just learning things to applying it in the workplace is a really important part of the mix. And I think, whereas you can always think of it's just L&D as being the only thing that is the vehicle for learning, the more you start to embrace the team, the more you start to connect experts, the more you enable the workplace to influence people's individual journeys rather than just sending them away to learn on their own, isolating them. I think you become effectively with a richer tapestry, a richer offer that will be much more flexible. So, Eden, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
To this one in particular?
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, again, your slides are very it helps me to understand that this is exactly what we're doing without putting it on a slide, which is very reassuring. But again, like you said, when you talk about agile learning mix, then obviously my team, which I didn't say before, and I will say it again, taking a system is a very important thing, but you also need to have, the dream team. You need to have a team of people that are talented and hardworking. And I'm so blessed to have these people working with me alongside, and they bring their creativity every day and new ways of opening and, new learning channels. So system is one thing, and organizational culture is one thing as well. But if you don't have the people, if you don't have the human element that is there to inspire, then it is a problem. And I can say that all these elements that you mentioned, whether it's a workplace and team engagement, personal and L&D, if it's me and my team that is doing the L&D and the global stuff, then obviously we have a lot of activities going on that are very much like you described between the team or personal even. So yes, the whole combination exists, and I think that's a very smart representation.
First question, Ada. I'm getting some great questions here. David, you could chime in on this as well. So, encountering what issues have been encountered around gamification and leaderboards when you've got some people who really don't want that stuff shared and other people who really, really like it? And I think this is specifically, Eden, I know that you have done a lot around gamification and your Learn to Earn program. It'd be interesting to talk a little bit about that.
Yep. It's
Okay. Has he frozen?
I think the audio was dropped out, so
he's frozen. I tell you what. Okay, so David, I'm directing at you. The question is about what about people who want to see gamification leaderboards and people that don't? How do you?
I think you just have to go with the flow, right? You don't have to force everybody to be part of that story. I mean, so Eden's back. Here we go.
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, fine. We lost you.
Sorry about that. It was a pop-up that I ignored on the screen. So just to give a little bit of background to people on the call that don't know what we're talking about, for us, for Playtech, gamification means you earn points for every learning chunk that you have. If you took a course or you joined an ILT, whatever, we give you points. And then during the year, you can use these points and to claim your benefits from the company. And when we started the pilot last year, I have to say that the overall feedback that we received back from the people is very positive. People didn't care if their points, the number of points is shared between everyone that took place in the pilot. People were very much hands-on when it came to accumulating points. At some point, it became really competitive, so we had to interfere and say, no, don't do that. Don't get too much competitive. But the overall experience that we had with the pilot that we've done with around 300 people before we go into open this to the rest of the business was very much positive and very highly regarded, because like we said, on one hand, we say to people, we're going to give you points that you can later redeem to gifts. But on the other hand, we earn their knowledge, because we actually taking them to the platform to learn more about our products, which serves us well. That's my goal. That's my objective. And on the way, they're getting, gifts or whatever to sort of like solidify their achievements.
Eden, the question was, how did you get approval to spend money on this from the senior executive?
That's such a good question. Well, this is sound bad, but usually when I request something from the business, I get it. And the reason I do is because I already proved that
Exactly.
my vision or my future, predictions came to fruition, and actually did realize when I went 3 years ago and said we need an LMS, and
Yeah.
we need to make sure that we have a platform where everybody can learn about our products. And I was, the main response was very dismissive. We managed for 20 years. Why do we need it now? And then when I sold my case and I said, give me the money and I'll prove it to you, and I'll show you why we need this. And 3 years after, I don't think anyone in Flight can envision not having Academy today. And that's really a significant milestone. So today, when I go to the business and I said, I need another person, or I need this, or I need, a new piece of technology that I want to use, everything makes sense because they say, okay, you saved us around 300K that we spend on external companies developing trainings for us and giving us platforms to convey those trainings. So you're in a very good place to make requests because you proved yourself right. So maybe I'm very privileged in that sense because I don't have to beg for things like I used to. But I say yeah, it's true. I used to beg for everything, but I think for those who are making the first steps out there and trying to convince the business, why is it important to have an LMS in place, or why is it important to have a system at all? I would say this: COVID really helped your case. 3 years ago, when we didn't have COVID, that was a different case. But now I think COVID is the perfect excuse or settings to say back to the business, that's why we need it, because there's no other solution. And it's completely scalable. And there are many, many, many good reasons, valid reasons, why would a CEO or a CFO would say yes to something like this at the end of the day. They just need to, we need to show them the light, right?
Yeah, one person's actually written on here that they're reporting it to the CFO. And I think David already answered this question, which was you've got to portray yourself, or you've got to be more than just a cost center. You've got to be how you make money for the business, how you reduce support calls, whatever, how you.
And you only really do that by having a strong conversation with your business leaders and knowing and I think what's interesting, I always used to say when I was doing these things back in the day, was you always try and find a willing partner and you try and create a halo effect. And I think that sounds like what Edan's managed to do, is create a halo effect of actually when we deliver something, it creates an amazing output and that outcome, and that creates more success, and that gives you permission. And I think if you can find some knock it out of the park business deliverables, some targets, some value add that you can deliver, it does start to create its own momentum, like Edan was saying.
Yeah.
And one thing that I would add to this is that the thing about LMS and education in general, you really need to have a vision. And when you have one and you know what is it that you want to achieve, and you set your objectives and goals in advance, and then you come to the business and you say, it's not just about buying a system. It's not like I'm buying now, I don't know, Outlook, or I'm buying, I don't know, some piece of software. I'm creating a new culture. I'm bringing a new vision to the company, and everything will change based on that. So when you display a vision rather than procurement, I guess that really helps as well.
Yeah, very much so. And maybe that's a nice sort of segue again into, because I think what we're talking about is building a business case. And it sounds like Edan's in a very luxurious place of not having to worry about building articulating too strong a business case. But I think invariably what you end up with the sense is of what value you're going to drive and what's the cost. And again, in that sort of sense of driving value in particular phases. So don't have to deliver all the value in one go, how you create steps or bunches of value for different audiences and build more value over time. And I think what Edan was talking about there was really this sort of sense of business impact. That could be culture change, it could be business numbers, it could be transformation, operating in new marketplaces. But sometimes those are hard to tangibly write down a number that they're going to deliver, but you know it's the right thing to do. And that's about taking people's hearts as much as it's taking their minds. But also in terms of sort of building your sense of value, how you can extract value by having more efficient, more scalable processes, and also the money that you can take out of the business through maybe using more cost-efficient systems and IT typically, as you sort of go down the list, it's easier to tie a number to it. The higher you are up the list, number one, number two, sometimes it's a little bit tighter to get a sense of the value that you're bringing. But it's really important to articulate that. And then in terms of the total cost of ownership, what we tend to find is people only look at the license fee without thinking of the support that they might need to wrap around the solution to make it work. And I think that's one area that we do find people struggle a little bit in terms of finding that value. So this is in the slide deck. We'll share this with you later to have a look through, but it's not just about the license fees in the middle. It's also about the cost of implementation. You tend to pick that up, but how much is it going to cost you to operate? How many administrators do you need? Who's going to do the configuration when it comes to innovating? Who does the check on the latest upgrade that you're getting from your provider to make sure it's not messing about with things that you're already doing, let alone all the other stuff that you need to do. So I think that's probably a useful thing, but this sense of know your business drivers, have a strong vision about how this is going to change the world for particular individuals, have a sense of milestones and when you're going to deliver outcomes, the benefits people are going to get at different stages. That helps you mobilize a call to action. And sometimes it's a matter of, as I said, finding a willing partner who can help you prove this once, and then the floodgates can open even more. So Eden, does that sort of follow sort of the sorts of things you go through? Or is it, how do you get this, I suppose, the momentum?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, but I have to say that my strategy is not influenced really by money. Even though I have to say it's a very important contributor,
no, I get you.
right?
Yeah.
It's a very important contributor. I mean, one of the things that we've done pre-COVID is to shift all the external development that we had into in-house because it's far more cost effective. So if you have people, if you have a studio that produces content for you, it's much easier than you have to rely on external providers, and then you have to make the justification every single time you ask for a budget. So for us, it's more to do with being creative. It's about innovation. It's about thinking, how can we take something as boring as compliance and make it interesting to employees so they won't send us hate mails after that, because it's a mandatory training and they have to do it. So we're thinking about new ways to approve things and do things. When it comes to our whole L&D approach, and I'm trying to think of the factors, what factors into manipulating that. As I said, money at this time is not really a contributor, but we have product adoption, compulsory things that we need to do, which affects us as well. And the state of the world apparently as well changed everything for us. We were trying to do something completely different in the last 3 months, and we found ourselves entertaining the masses from home. So that definitely changed.
Okay, so we're into our last 10 minutes. So what I'm thinking is what we can do is maybe just wrap things up by thinking about maybe the common mistakes or the lessons that we've learned or that you've learned, Edan, in sort of your journey, and I can sort of share some things as things that we've recognized from doing research and from our experience of talking to customers around what lessons they've learned. And I was going to just pick these out, and then maybe what you can do is say whether you agree or not and how important this is. So the first one, maybe the biggest lesson that we hear, is that you should engage your IT department. That's one of the biggest causes of car crash implementations and failures. What do you think, Edan? Is that a yes, a no, a maybe, or do you keep them well away from what you're doing? Yes.
Personally, for me, that's a big no. For me, no. I'll change engage to stay away from to be honest, but that's just me. It's just because again, we just in the last 3 years again, we've learned that we just learned that some departments or some teams are better left to themselves, and IT is definitely one of them. Especially Blade Tech, I have to say. So we do most of it ourselves. So we don't engage them in any kind of decision. We tell them what to do when the time comes for that, and we say, just please do it. That's it.
I don't. My only what's the word caveat around that, because I think that is a valid approach, is that you just need to know that it's going to fit with your IT kit and know who's going to pick up the phone if somebody's got a problem. And if you can resource that, that's good. If you need IT to own the security, and sign-off security, do make sure they're getting engaged early, even if only to open up or whitelist the email source for your partner so that they don't put all the emails that come from your external partner into spam. So which can be a challenge when you're launching things. So that's number one. That's good response. Next one, involve end users in the selection. What do you think, Edan?
Well, I'm somewhere in the middle about this one, because in some initiatives, definitely, like for example, with gamification, we wanted to hear what people have to say about this, because it's going to affect everyone tremendously. So we want their opinion about this, for instance. But when it comes to L&D strategy, or when thinking about decisions that we have to make about, L&D strategy, where we want to invest most of our resources, etc., we don't really ask for end users' opinions and telling us where we should go. We do ask feedback when feedback is required. For example, if we produce a content and we want to know something very specific about that content, don't tell me what you think about this in general, because people usually tend to not give their full honest opinion. So we ask questions where necessary, and we involve them where it really is something that is going to affect them tremendously. Other than that, not really.
Yeah, I like your balanced approach, and I think, but it's important from my point of view. I think it's important that if you do whatever you do in complete isolation, you end up with a higher risk. So do test things out, do get input. Your end users aren't the decision maker, but they may help you temper or help you think about how you implement something or introduce something. If you're going to select something, I tend to think use personas and reels use cases, not functionality lists. Do you think this is a good piece of advice, or again?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just to add to this, if you were referring to use employees or end users in the process of selecting an LMS, for example, that can be a very good idea. It maybe I misunderstood that. I thought you meant like decision making, involve them in like day-to-day basis, and I'm very much opposed to that.
No, I'm with you on that one. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
The other thing is know your total cost of ownership and invest in your own resources. And I think this is an interesting one about understanding the true cost. Quite often, I think what we see is people underestimate how much they need to invest, and that creates some sort of challenges down the line. So, how do you manage to? Do you think that's true? How do you manage to get a sense of, are we being cost efficient?
Oh, definitely. I mean, again, for us, the opposite process had occurred ever since we had placed LMS in our company, because we used to really hemorrhage cash over external resources to pay for companies for content development, content delivery, implementation, etc., etc. So we actually see the opposite now happening. If you look at the yearly budget, how much we used to spend outside and how much we're spending now to get the exact same yields is the reverse process for us. But it all depends on your strategy, because if, for example, you're going to build a studio that produces cutting edge materials in terms of content and in terms of sounds and videos, what have you. So obviously you need to prepare yourself for a massive investment, but it all depends on on what is it that you're trying to achieve. Are you just worried about distribution? That's the only thing that matters to you. You create a PDF and how am I going to send it to everybody and track this? Or you want to create one kind of experience to your employees via the content you share with them. So both approaches are valid. The only question is, what is it that you want to do? So yes, I totally agree with what you said here.
Yeah, cool. And the other one, we'll skip over this one, but do your research. What I've done included in our deck is the research infographic from the thing we did last month around what people are finding helpful with managing COVID and the transition to digital learning. But this last one, and I think this is always catches people out, and maybe I'm interested in your view. Are you a big bang person, Eden, or are you start small and then accelerate on back success? Where do you sit on the fence? And what do you think?
Absolutely the first one.
Big bang.
I'm too impatient. Absolutely, I'm too impatient for the latter. No way that I can. My boss always tells me, think about the 80%. Just deliver 80%. And I said, what are we going to do with the other 20? Put it on my grave when I'm dead? And he's like, no. It's like, no, let's put the 80% in. And I was like, no, I will never. Just 100, nothing less than 100. So yes, I think everybody that knows me and works with me can testify that I'm all or nothing. I hate somewhere in the middle, because somewhere in the middle for me is mediocrity, and I don't like it. I don't appreciate it. But again, it depends. It depends on what the subject in question. If it's a content, absolutely, it has to be impeccable. If it's delivery, it has to be impeccable. But some things, like some things can be 80%, I guess. But my approach is always do your best, give everything you have, and never settle for anything that is less than perfect. I think that's
great. And I think one thing, it really it's about you judging your own level of risk around this, and the level of risk around support, maintenance, IT. You might want to do a proof of concept before you go big bang. But I think one thing from Edan's story is really, it's your passion that carries you through. It's your belief and what will work, and the connection you have to your audience, and having good people in your team, which will make this a success. And I think if you connect those things,
that's good.
I think that works really well.
I also have to add to what you said here. If talking about, for example, onboarding an LMS system, to have like a pilot group or a test group that checked the system beforehand was an idea that I played with in my head for a very long time, and thought, should I do this or should I do that? But it occurred to me, again, with the culture of the organization that I work in, it occurred to me that if I go to people and ask them to say this system is better than this one or whatever, their first reaction would be, why do we even need that system? So I decided to not do it.
Cool. No, it makes sense. I think we've probably got down to the last few seconds, Paul. So I don't know if we've got a chance to pick out some more questions.
One question was challenges of digital delivery, testing uptake of learning, and the difficulty of incorporating active learning sets. Big question, actually, for just a couple of minutes. David?
I would say that's the bedrock of great learning, is getting it applied in the workplace. And I think actually technology enables us to think creatively about how we use those action learning sets to report back and get feedback at distance and scale. I think it's critical, and the technology probably enables more action learning and more reflection and more support groups than we've been able to before. So go for it. I think it's a brilliant thing to do.
Okay, thank you. I think we've kind of run out of time, actually. Any closing comments from you, David or Edan?
I was going to say, Edan's done an amazing job, and thank you for sharing your insight. It's been absolutely awesome. I had a great time. Thank you, Paul, for inviting us.
I enjoyed it very much.
Brilliant stuff.
It's been great. Thank you so much. I learned so much, and thanks everyone for joining. We had a very good attendance, and pretty much everyone stayed with us right to the end. So you kept it very entertaining. Well done.
Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoyed.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Edan. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.